These people right here could look real serious. I'm going to take a quick picture to send back home, because when I told my wife I was at a conference and she looked up Gold Coast, it didn't go over very well. So I want proof that I'm actually working. Now you'll see a phone number up here on the screen, and I'd like you all to put this in your contacts really quickly. And while you do that, I'm going to tell you just a brief little bit about myself, because I noticed other people were talking about themselves and I don't have a slide about it. I've been in this industry about 8 years. My title doesn't really reflect what I do. I'm an engineer at heart. Normally it's t-shirts and blue jeans. I've been in high tech all my life. I've got somewhere around 30 patents. I was a kernel mode NT developer. I've worked in Bill Gates' house. So I've done a lot of really high tech stuff, and I've kind of moved into the product stuff over the last 15 years or so. Now the reason we're entering this number is I'm going to show you how I can hack your phone to get all your pictures and display them on the screen before the conference is over. No, actually we're going to do some surveys as we go through the presentation. So if you go back 5 or 6 years, being a CIO or an IT director, your goal was to be anonymous. You know, if everything was running smooth, it was great. BlackBerry server is working, the financial systems are working, life is good. Your biggest fear was waking up in the morning and seeing your name in the newspaper about some security breach or something. Today, the landscape has changed. You are now asked to participate in the boardroom to help develop strategy moving forward. And that's a huge change. So we're going to talk a little bit today about what happened and what to do about it. So I am not going to go into this stuff that we beat a dead horse, but just a quick review of some of the things that happened and mention some things that I thought are interesting that weren't mentioned earlier. So we've heard about the Jackson reforms, we've heard about alternative business structures, and that's for part of the world, but you know, the US hasn't been left out. Again, I'm from Atlanta, and we're actually talking about waking up and moving into the modern world and move from cash to accrual accounting. And then we've got really interesting laws, like in Texas, where I'm from. We're looking at if you're not a practicing lawyer, you cannot have the word chief or officer in your title. So there's a lot of people walking around, or will be walking around with business cards saying financial or information. So there's a lot of change going on with government type regulations. We've all talked about the financial crisis. I don't think you experienced it quite as bad as the UK and the US, but it's a fact. It pretty much affected law firms worldwide. And why did it affect law firms? It affected law firms because it affected clients. If we go back again about 7 years, work was based on relationships. The partner relationship to the general counsel. And that's how work had been done forever. Everybody was happy, lawyers were making tons of money, and then all this financial crisis and things happened. And again, all of a sudden, there were cost centers, and we moved from the model of relationships, sometimes people call billable hours, to the model of results. You have to produce results, and results means value. Show me that you can deliver value for our firm. That was a huge shift. It was a wake-up call. I would argue not all the lawyers have woken up yet, but it's still happening, and that's kind of what we're living with. Well, what about technology? Well, Gartner's got this thing about the digital dragon. In fact, this is probably the most disruptive time in this industry since the typewriter. And that's, I'm passionate about two things, change and technology. I love both. And we're living, you know, this is the perfect storm where we're living in both of these. And there's two approaches you can take. You can either be really fearful of it and fail, or you can take advantage of it. And we will talk a lot about that as we're going through this presentation. So how is this manifested in law firms? It's manifested several ways, and I'll talk about these in a little bit. But the interesting thing about this slide, as you move from left to right, the amount of change to take advantage of change increases, okay? So let me talk about that for a second. To be fearful, well, I don't have to do anything. I just have to be scared. If I'm a CIO in a law firm and I want to increase efficiencies for some reason, that doesn't take a lot of change because it doesn't necessarily impact the front office user so much. So I can kind of do that on my own. If I want to take a new opportunity and take advantage of this change, there has to be alignment between me, if I were a managing partner, and my CIO or my IT director, because it requires both to do this. And again, that's why you're sitting in on these strategy decisions. I told Barris I was going to pimp her out. Coors is a perfect example where I haven't asked you, but I'm sure you do have a nice relationship with your managing partner, because to do something as drastic as that open floor plan and pull partners out of offices, that's a strategy. There's a reason you're doing it, and you have to be aligned. All right, let's look at these a little more in detail. So why are people fearful of technology? Well, number one, the sheer volume of data. I think, I might get the number wrong, but it's like 1.8 quintillion bytes of data are generated every day. That's 18 zeros. That's a lot of data. Can you imagine doing an e-discovery solution for that? Email. I mean, I don't know how many times I've been told that email is dead. We still generate 140 billion emails a day. So the sheer volume of data is ever increasing. Mobility. Lots of people are afraid of mobility. It's kind of funny the way the mobility came on the scene in this industry. It wasn't like it was a well-planned out strategy by IT. It was some partner that came into the firm with his iPad, and he didn't ask if he could put it on the network. He says, I need this on the network by tonight. And that was before any MDM strategies or anything like that. And there's still fear that if you leave your iPhone in a restaurant or on a bus or something, bad things can happen. We've got other things, social media in the cloud. 85% of lawyers admit that they use Dropbox. Now, Dropbox has gotten better, but lawyers will use technology and not understand actually what's happening. We've covered the cloud a lot. I agree with Mike. I don't know if Mike's still here yesterday. When you say the word cloud, everybody has a different idea. And if you don't really know what it is, yeah, it's a little scary. But there's one other big thing about technology that's a little scary. And before we do that, we're going to try our first poll. If I can. All right. So the way this polling works is, question is, do you have an office in China? Now you have to key in this text. And the reason you have to key in this text for us is because if we just put numbers up there like 1, 2, or 3, we'd have to pay a lot of money for it, because the same polling service does So You Think You Can Dance and American Idol. And so we have to come up with unique phrases. So key in what you think. And I'll give you a couple of seconds here. Wow. Okay, so 50%. Okay. So it's really interesting. There's a few firms in China. A lot of people are thinking about it, and a lot aren't thinking about it. Okay? Actually, that's kind of from a technology standpoint, that's a good thing. Client data theft probably brings the most fear to any of you in the room. And if you are doing business in China, there's a 100% probability that your infrastructure has been compromised, and your phone system has been compromised, and whatever mobility strategy you have has been compromised. And I am shocked by the number of firms I talk to when I ask them about how many FTEs they have simply monitoring the systems to make sure that nobody's breaking in, or at least monitoring activities. and it's usually less than 1, even in the larger firms. All right, efficiency. Technology is great for efficiency. Again, this can be planned or not planned. It doesn't necessarily have to be a strategy. A lot of times it's a reaction because, as in 2009, the legal industry laid off 12,900 of staff-type employees. Somehow that work had to be done. And so we looked at technology for things like NBI, discovery, all sorts of things to increase efficiency. But then again, if we really take advantage of technology, it's capitalizing on these newer opportunities. Coors was a perfect example. Jonathan's not here. I think he's probably in the UK buying another company. Slater and Gordon, the way their business model works is totally different. They don't have all the partner problems that a lot of us have, and they're taking advantage of things like that. Those are a couple of examples of opportunities. So we did have to put one marketing slide up here to have a quote from some smart guy. Basically, what Socrates is saying is, don't worry about the old. Don't live in the glory days. Let's look forward and take advantage of change. Here are a few examples of firms that have done that. Now, do you notice anything strange here? Anybody? No, there's names. None of them are an existing, established law firm. Most of the change we see occurring in this industry are startups with a new business model. And as each day goes by, it's a little bit more of a threat. All right. So we've talked about the fear factor. We've talked about technology. We've talked about the managing partner. So the managing partner says, yep, we need to do something. Well, who does the managing partner turn to help him, to guide him through this complication of technology? It's you. It's the CIO. And that's why you're involved. So once you're involved, what do? What is technology? And I'm sure I'm going to have a question from Brucey here because we argued about this before it started. But I would argue technology is not the what, but it's the how. Let me give you an example. So our strategy is we're going to roll out mobility. Okay, we rolled out mobility because it's going to do wonderful things. Well, what are the wonderful things? How do I measure those wonderful things? Well, don't worry about it. It's going to be wonderful. So that's technology as a strategy. That's if technology is the what. Let's talk about the how. We want to increase, which I don't even know if this is possible, time input by 20% from our lawyers. That may not even be possible no matter what you do, but let's just say we had a goal. And you know what? If they had mobile devices, they could enter time wherever they work, and they're easy to use in most of the desktop applications. So we think by rolling out a mobile deployment, that will actually capture more time. The nice thing about that is the technology is the how, the capturing more time is the what, and I can measure it. So there's just a very simple example of what I mean by the how versus the what. Okay, so our second question, I think I've got 3 or 4 of these polling questions, so don't worry. What scares you the most? So we've got security of the network and that's supposed to be infrastructure, all those mobile devices, lack of investment. I bet you 3 years ago, lack of investment would have been very high. Or, I'm just trying to keep my head above water. My partnership is coming to me with all these problems. I got to go look at all these solutions. I got to implement all this software. I can't even keep up. So let's see what you think. I'm going to count to 20, and then I'm going to change the screen. Actually, 10. I always get surprised on these polls. So I was doing a talk a while ago, and one of the Microsoft representatives told me, wow, our devices are really taking off in law firms. So I said, oh, cool, I'll do a poll about, what type of devices you're using. And you had iPhone off the charts, Android, and Microsoft devices, mobile devices were 0. So I took that poll out because it was kind of embarrassing. But that's very interesting. You're overworked, and people are attacking your network, and you're worried about it. And that's pretty much what I see all over the world. So Gartner lists two priorities for IT staff. The first one is just increasing efficiencies. I think as an industry, we've done a very good job of this, partially, again, because we've been forced to do it, but partially because of your skills. You've done very well with what you have. Over the last couple of years, you've pretty much virtualized everything, automated a lot of business processes. You've done a very good job. But the other thing that you really need to think about and do in parallel is, again, take advantage of some of this technology to use it for a strategic differentiator of your firm versus your competitors. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. So I'm going to go through this slide really quick. So the first question you have to ask yourself is, when I look at new technology, what should it do? What's important about technology? And I would argue there's three components that are extremely important. Number one, it should not go old. It should not go stale. You don't want to go implement the same thing or something that provides the same function in 3 or 4 years. So find something that doesn't go stale. The second thing it should do is it should scale. So I hope you all have plans to grow. And grow by not getting taken over or merging, but organic growth. So you want to grow as the firm grows organically. You want to grow as the firm grows multiple offices, geography. And you want to have software or technology that grows in functionality as your requirements change. Those three things are very important. However, I think probably the one we focus on, and maybe the most important one of all, is it needs to allow you to do something you can't do today. So why am I buying this? A couple of examples up here. Discovery. Okay, we can all do discovery, but when we have all that tons of data, really humans can't do that anymore. Business intelligence. Business intelligence is very popular today. CRM and legal project management. In fact, the interesting thing about legal project management, we're going to ask a question in a minute, that's a lot how I tell. That's a barometer I use to see if firms are talking the talk or walking the walk. The UK, they're walking the walk because they have to. You've got things like the Jackson reforms and things like that. Here, several firms are walking the walk. I'm not quite sure why. Maybe it's because they have friends in the UK, but a lot of firms are actually implementing this here that I've talked to. In the US, there is such a resistance to change that even though the GCs and corporate are asking for this, they're still on the talking the talk, or maybe using Excel for one-off bespoke type engagements. So the question is, and I'm looking up here on some of these things because this screen is blank, so excuse me for turning around. Has your firm adopted legal project management? And again, I'll give you a couple of seconds. All righty. That's very interesting. So most firms have plans or are in the process of implementing it. And the other thing we notice is that the fixed fee types engagements, if you would ask me a question last year, about 11% of fixed fee engagements worldwide of legal work is fixed fee engagements, and that's starting to almost turn into an L shape. It's really increasing. It's in the 20% or something like this year. So that's very, very encouraging. Okay, there's two approaches to adopting this technology. And it's very interesting. I was at dinner a couple of months ago in the UK with a managing partner, And he was like, his head was in the sand almost, or he was frozen. He couldn't make a decision because he realized, he said, you know, I realize I have to do something. I have to take advantage of this. But I listened to all these people, like the speaker this morning and Furlong in Canada, and there's no agreement where the legal industry is going to end or end up being in 5 or 10 years. So if I make a decision and I make a decision in the wrong direction, I'm going to go out of business. He was really worried about that. On the flip side, he realized that if he didn't make a decision and he didn't do anything, he is also going out of business. He's also going to go out of business. So what do? Do you wait and see, or do you jump in and do something? I told him that if I were in his shoes, what I would do is, yes, I would recognize the fact that we're in a sea of change, and I would take advantage of that change and not worry about where it's going. I would put in technologies that allow me to be nimble, much better, faster to react than my competitors, and use this change as a huge advantage. So my recommendation was find ways to do that now. Now the other challenge these guys are having, which has turned a little bit into a cottage industry, which is really interesting, as you sit in these boardrooms and are part of the strategic decisions, your managing partner has questions about you. I know a friend now that's a consultant, also in the UK, and what does he do? He consults the managing partner, telling him whether his IT, CIO or IT director knows his stuff. So that's evidence right there that your opinion is important, or your role's opinion is certainly important, because they're even hiring consultants to tell them whether your opinions are good. So it's very, very interesting. The one last thing I'd like to leave you with is we talked about the what and we talked about the how. There's one thing, very important thing, that we left out. Anybody have any ideas? This audience is quiet. It's the why. Why are we doing this? And you need to ask yourselves, why are your customers doing business with you? And if you align your why with their why, you utilize the what and the how, then you'll be very successful. Thank you very much.